Every day, you are part of a grand performance, a show that's been running for 100 years. You play your part when you choose a certain brand of coffee, when you feel a surge of pride for a flag when you buy a product, not because you need it, but because of what it says about you. We think we're in control. We think our desires are our own, that we are rational individuals making rational choices. But what if I told you that the very rule book for our modern world, how we shop, what we desire, who we vote for, was written by one man? A man you've probably never heard of. But he saw the human mind as a machine that could be programmed. And he spent his life writing the code. His name was Edward Bernays. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew. And while his famous uncle was busy mapping the hidden landscape of the human subconscious, Bernays was figuring out how to conquer it, how to weaponize it, and how to sell it. This is the story of the man who engineered your consent, sold the world a lie, and in doing so, created the reality we all live in today. To understand Edward Bernays, you have to go back to the end of World War I. Bernays had been working for the U.S. government as part of a team tasked with an impossible mission, selling the war to the American people. The slogan they came up with was brilliant, making the world safe for democracy. It worked. So well, in fact, that Bernays was stunned. He had seen firsthand how propaganda could turn a peaceful, isolationist nation into a population baying for war. And after the war, a thought struck him. A thought that would make him a very rich and very powerful man. If you can use propaganda for war, why can't you use it for peace? He just needed to give it a new name, something more sophisticated. He called it public relations. Bernays set up an office on Broadway in New York, but he wasn't just a press agent. He was a psychologist. He had been studying his uncle Sigmund Freud's work, and he was fascinated by one core idea, that human beings are not rational creatures. We are driven by primal, irrational, unconscious desires. And Bernays realized that if you could tap into those hidden desires, you could get people to do, well, almost anything. His first major test came from the American Tobacco Company. They had a problem. They were selling cigarettes to half the population men. But at the time, it was taboo for women to smoke in public. It was seen as unfeminine, even disreputable. They were missing out on 50% of the market. So they hired Bernays. A traditional advertiser would have just made an ad saying, "Ladies, smoke our cigarettes." Bernays knew that would fail. You couldn't just attack the logic. You had to attack the unconscious taboo. So he consulted a psychoanalyst who told him that cigarettes to men were a symbol of power, phallic symbols even. Bernays realized that if he could reposition cigarettes for women as a symbol of asterisk, their own asterisk growing power, of their rebellion against male authority, they would sell. So he staged an event. During the 1929 Easter Sunday parade in New York City, one of the biggest public events of the year, he hired a group of fashionable young socialites. At a prearranged signal, they all stopped, dramatically lit up cigarettes, and began to smoke them in front of the assembled press photographers, whom Bernays had already tipped off. He told the press that these women weren't just smoking. They were lighting torches of freedom. It was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. He had taken a meaningless consumer product and linked it to the deepest political desires of the era: feminism, equality, and liberation. The story was a national sensation. The taboo was broken. Cigarette sales to women skyrocketed. And Edward Bernays had proven his theory. Don't sell the product, sell the feeling. Don't appeal to the rational mind. Appeal to the irrational emotion. He had learned how to engineer consent, and corporate America couldn't get enough. His techniques became the blueprint for modern consumer culture. A company making bacon wanted to sell more. Bernays didn't make an ad. He hired a doctor to conduct a study that concluded a hearty breakfast was healthier than a light one. He then sent this study to 5,000 other doctors for their signature. and published the results in major newspapers with headlines screaming, "Doctors say, eat a hearty breakfast." The articles, of course, suggested bacon and eggs as the perfect example. Sales of bacon went through the roof. He created what we now call the third-party authority. Don't tell people your product is good. Get a doctor, a scientist, a celebrity, an expert to tell them for you. A company that made paper cups wanted people to believe they were more sanitary than reusable glass ones. Bernays created a scientific report linking glasses to the spread of disease and founded an organization called the Committee for the Promotion of Sanitary Dispensing. It sounded official. It sounded important. It was a complete fabrication, funded entirely by his client. He had invented what we now call astroturfing, creating fake grassroots movements to push a corporate agenda. From convincing kids that soap carving contests were a fun hobby for Procter & Gamble's Ivory soap, to making it fashionable for men to wear wristwatches. A product seen as feminine before World War I, Bernays transformed America. He taught corporations how to turn a population of citizens who thought in terms of their needs into a population of consumers who thought in terms of their desires. He created a new kind of human, one who sought to express their innermost self not through their community, or their ideas, or their actions, but through the products they bought. But his most audacious and most terrifying act of social engineering was yet to come. And this time, he wasn't just selling a product. He was selling a war. In the early 1950s, Bernays was hired by the United Fruit Company. Today, we know them as Chiquita. At the time, they were an American corporate behemoth that effectively owned vast swaths of Central America, a region they condescendingly called the Banana Republics. They had a problem in Guatemala. The country had a new, democratically elected president, Jacobo Renz, and he was planning to redistribute some of the vast, unused lands owned by United Fruit to the country's landless peasants. For United Fruit, this was a disaster. So they called Bernays. Bernays knew he couldn't frame this as a corporation trying to protect its profits. He had to frame it as a battle for the soul of America. He launched what was, essentially, a psychological war. He created a fake news agency, the Middle America Information Bureau, which flooded the American press with a constant stream of stories. These stories never mentioned United Fruit or bananas. Instead, they talked about a growing threat in America's backyard. They painted President Renz not as a Democrat, but as a communist puppet controlled by Moscow. They warned that a Soviet beachhead was being established just a few hours from American shores. He flew influential American journalists down to Guatemala on carefully managed fact-finding trips, where they were wined, dined, and fed the company line. They returned and wrote exactly what he wanted them to. The message was simple, powerful, and terrifying. Guatemala was a threat to American freedom. It was a complete lie. But it worked. The American public, and crucially, the CIA and the Eisenhower administration, became convinced that a communist takeover was imminent. In 1954, the CIA orchestrated a coup. They armed a rebel faction, flew old World War II bombers over the capital, and forced President Renz from power. He was replaced by a brutal military dictator. What followed was 40 years of civil war, repression, and the deaths of over 200,000 Guatemalans. Edward Bernays, the man who sold bacon and cigarettes, had successfully used the tools of public relations to overthrow a sovereign government, all to protect the profits of a banana company. Edward Bernays lived to be 103 years old. He never expressed any remorse for his work. To him, the engineering of consent wasn't evil. It was necessary. He believed that the masses were too irrational, too driven by dangerous herd instincts, to be left to their own devices. They needed to be guided, shaped, and controlled by an intelligent, invisible elite for the good of society. His legacy is the invisible architecture of our world. It's in the political slogans that appeal to our fears instead of our reason. It's in the advertisements that promise us identity and happiness through a purchase. It is in the very idea that the crowd is a dangerous beast that needs to be managed. He gave power a new voice, a voice that didn't command. It persuaded. It didn't threaten. It seduced. Bernays took his uncle's dark map of the human mind, and he drew all over it. He drew pathways to our deepest insecurities, our hidden fears, and our secret desires. And then he sold that map to the highest bidder, and we've been living in the world he created ever since. A world where we are told that what we want is more important than what we need, and where the greatest lie of all is the one that convinces us we are free. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden forces that shape our world. See you in the next one.